Al, if you can help us out a little bit with
Yeah, can you
leading
hear me?
that would be great.
Yeah. So we want to, we would like to nominate Lauren Daly as the chair for the curriculum committee. And I just need a yay from everybody.
Yay.
Yeah, you got it.
Thank you.
Well, you're it, Lauren.
Thank
Good
you.
job.
Well, you
Congratulations,
sound
Lauren.
bad.
Thank you.
Okay, so I am just about logged in. I'm in my office now. I want to thank everybody for being available tonight. I think this meeting was the most rescheduled committee meeting of the entire year. When we first started to talk about this, the content of today, we had an entirely different board. You know, we definitely were eager to share some of the results. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our team. Our curriculum development team, our CDT team, consists of Allison Breedy Johnson, Kara Watson Wanzer, Kelly Truchas also attends, Christy Zalita. So these folks here are deeply ingrained in the instructional improvement work in the district. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kara Wanzer, who is our data guru for the district, and she's going to present our data for us tonight. Go ahead, Kara.
And thanks for having me tonight. I know you received the slide deck in advance or the Canva presentation, but I'm going to go ahead and project while we kind of talk this through and go over some of the accountability results that we received from the 24-25 school year. So I'm going to just move a couple things over here and hopefully. No, that's not. Hold on 1 second. So of course, this is when my computer starts to act weird. Okay, let's see if this works. What is that mode? Okay.
Okay, you good?
Yeah, can you guys see the slide? First slide.
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Okay, so I've changed the date several times of when this was presented. So depending on which slide deck, but I have today's date here now. And this is to go with Kara's goal around teaching and learning. And specifically when we're talking about the accountability index, we're talking about systemic school improvement and district improvement, and really trying to look at how are we supporting all leaders to be empowered to make evidence-based decisions to improve student outcomes. So as we look at this slide deck, we definitely want to give you a little bit of context of where we are today. Although these results of the accountability index at the front of the presentation are around the 24-25 school year. But right now, I just want to embed you in what our school demographics look like, or our district demographics. Our overall enrollment for this year as of our October 1st collection from our freeze date is actually now 11,450. So what happens is throughout the year, even though we take a snapshot on October 1st, we actually have several other deadlines where we're cleaning up the data with other districts and things like that. So that number does fluctuate a little bit. But when that did fluctuate by the end of January, we had an overall decrease of enrollment by 471 students from the previous year. So that is, if I'm comparing the October 2024 collection to the one we did in October 2025. As of this year and as of today, we actually have 11,385 students. So that's as of March 12th. Our high needs population, just kind of as a reminder, high needs also consists of our multilingual learners, our free and reduced lunch, students who qualify for that, and then our students with disabilities. So that's often referred to from this Connecticut State Department of Education as high needs. So if we're looking at our multilingual learners, we're at 37% of our student population are currently identified as multilingual learners. That does not count students who've exited because they've reached a level of language proficiency. So that doesn't include students who came to us as multilingual learners and now are exited from the program. Our free and reduced lunch number is at 56%. We get that number through students whose families qualify through our SNAP benefits. So in the past, we had people filling out forms and things like that, but this is students who directly qualify. And then students with disabilities, we are at an increase of 15%. So just as a reminder, our percentage overall, we have the highest percentage of students who are multilingual learners in the state of Connecticut. And our per pupil expenditure as of the last published data from 23-24, according to the state, was at $17,100. So just a quick background of what the accountability index is. This is kind of our district and school report cards that we get from the state. So those of you who are new to the board and or haven't kind of looked at this in a while, it's a comprehensive framework that they developed in order to measure performance at a district and school level in order for us to identify improvement areas. So they have their own accountability measures at the state that they need to say that they're working on. So this is an opportunity for them to really monitor what's happening at the district and at a school level. And it's a great way for us to see how schools are doing and how we're doing overall. So what we really focus on is that number 3, identifying improvement areas. So we drill down, is able to be our primary focus to say, like, how are we supporting leaders in the district, both at central office and at the school level, in order to pinpoint areas that we need to focus on in order to improve outcomes for all our learners. We have a tiered level of support that often happens at the school level. And this is the way that we determine that often, as well as the proficiency levels at school levels. So our accountability index values, we put schools into categories. We don't get a category as a district. We just get an overall percentage that we earned for points. But with schools, their points put them into categories. So if you're a category 1 school, your accountability index is falling between 85 and 100. And then number 2 is if you're a category 2 school, 70 to 84.9 and so forth. At the bottom are category 4 and 5 schools that are often identified as focus and turnaround schools. This is how it shook out for Danbury Public Schools for the 24-25 school year. So we had one category 1 school, we had several category 2 and category 3 schools. So when we're looking at these, there was a mistake on one of the category 3, I think, lists that had Shelter Rock under both. It has been corrected on this deck. They are actually a category 2 school. They were a category 3 school the year before, so they did move up and were a category 2 school. From the 24-25 school year, we had an addition of AIS as a category 1. We had none the year before in 23-24. There were no category 1 schools. We went from 6 category 2 schools to 7, and we went from 11 to 10 category 3 schools. So we want to reduce, obviously, the amount of category 3 schools we have and have folks moving up. So you'll see how that broke out. Our schools of distinction, which we're very proud to say, we had 4, as we did the year before. This year, King Street Primary was again a school of distinction. Great Plains School was a school of distinction, South Street, and AIS. And AIS was also the year before. So AIS and King Street Primary were both schools of distinction in the prior year. There's several ways you can become a school of distinction. So it's always, you have to be in the top 10 percentage points you have to be in the top 10% of the statewide accountability index results. So there are 4 categories. One is overall performance. So having the highest level of performance in the accountability index. Another is your growth for all students. Another is your growth for high needs students. And then also overall improvement. So if your overall accountability index increased from one year to the next, and you were in the top 10% of that happening, you would be identified as an overall improver. So you can see King Street Primary was great improvement in high performance. So they had 2 areas of distinction, which is fantastic. Great Plain was identified for their high growth of all students in math, and South Street was identified for their high growth in for their high needs students in math. And then AIS had several areas, including high performance and high growth for all students in ELA, high growth for high needs students in ELA and math. So that was a fantastic, even improvement from the year before, and which puts them in a category 1 because their overall accountability index is in the high performance category, as King Street Primary is as well. So just real quick, as we're kind of looking at these schools and our schools of distinction, if we're considering the Alliance districts overall in the state of Connecticut, you see here the number of schools that they have for school of distinction. So overall for Danbury, we had 4, and the only district who received more schools of distinction than we did was Meriden. Okay, these are the accountability index indicators that were measured on, right? So we have academic achievement. Now, when we consider that, all these indicators have different weights. So they're not all considered the same within our overall performance. So depending on the district and then the school level, grade levels that they serve may have different weights for their overall school. But considering this, these are the areas that they have measurements for. So academic achievement, and we're going to get a little bit deeper into that, how we're seeing academic growth, our participation rates, chronic absenteeism, which we're proud to say has been a great area of improvement for us, and then how we're doing with our post-secondary preparation and readiness, as well as how we're graduating students. We have several indicators for that we'll get into, as well as physical fitness and arts access. So to dig in a little deeper to what our score is, Danbury Public Schools overall accountability index for the 24-25 school year was 68.7%. When I say 68.7%, that is the percent of our total possible points that we could have earned. So we earned 68.7% of our overall points in those areas that were on the previous slide. In the 23-24 school year, we were at 66.2, so we had an overall a 2.5 percentage point increase. We were identified as having an ELA performance index gap as well as a graduation rate gap for our 2022 cohort. So when we have a 2022 cohort, that's our 6-year graduation gap that I'm referring to. So when you have your high needs students, what they do is they break out high needs students and non-high needs students. As a reminder, our high needs students are anyone who qualifies as a multilingual learner, a student with a disability, or someone who qualifies to receive free and reduced lunch. You could be in one of those categories, or you could be in all 3, and you would count as one, okay? So what they look at is how students who are non-high needs graduated compared to high needs. If we were an outlier, according to where the state was, you're considered to have a graduation rate gap. So that was the case. Our gap was 11.4 and the state was at 8.6. So because we're above that state gap as an outlier, then we are actually considered to have a graduation rate gap. Our ELA gap, the state threshold, which was the gap plus 1 standard deviation, was 16.9. We were 17.7. So that's putting us in having an achievement gap of how our high needs students are performing compared to our non-high needs performance. And we can ask a couple questions about that later if you have any clarifying questions. So for academic achievement, what we have here is how it breaks out and what that looks like of how our students are performing on each content area. So in the first column, you'll see what our percentage of points were earned during the 24-25 school year compared to the 23-24 school year. And then you'll see in the third column is the change. So when we're looking at this, I just want to remind you, we're looking at the percentage of points earned on like the report card. It's not our proficiency levels. Okay, so that's a different measurement. So if we're looking at ELA all students, we're looking at their performance index. That considers students who are in grades 3 through 8 for their Smarter Balanced performance, as well as SAT performance for our 11th graders on the SAT school day. So this was our score for the previous year. We increased by 2.4. They then break out our high need students. We increased by 2.6. Our math is the ESPA, as well as the SAT for grades 3 through 8 and grades 11. We increased in those areas as well, a little over 2 percentage points in each of those. And our science, we relatively stayed the same for all students, and we increased 1.5 for high needs. The next piece that they look at is how did students grow? And when we're talking about how they grow, students have to have had a data point from the previous year. So it would only include grades 4 through 8, because our fourth graders would have had to have a data point in 3rd grade. So what they look at is on ELA for us, Smarter Balanced, is how did students perform 1 year on their scaled score, and then how many points did they increase the next year? So what they call that is the average percent target achieved. So what the state gives us is a target for each student when they take the Smarter Balanced assessment. They say, if you got this scaled score this year, we expect you to grow 50 points, say. And if you got all the way to the target, you were at 100%. If you got halfway to the target, you're at 50. So what they're looking at is on average, how far students are getting to their targets. So for those points, we increased pretty drastically in ELA at 6.9 for our overall students, and about 5.8 or 6 percentage points for our high needs. And math, we saw 4 percentage points increase across all students and high needs. The other category that we're measured on when we consider growth is how students are doing on the Lost Links assessment. And the Lost Links assessment is what measures the language acquisition for students who are identified as multilingual learners in our district. So what they look at is students who took an assessment first year, they're with us, and then the second year, how did they perform? Same with Smarter Balance. On the Lost Links, they give a target of where students should be hitting on their next assessment in the next grade. So they're looking at what's the average of students' growth in those areas. So in this case, we remained pretty much the same across both literacy and their oral language acquisition. So when we look at those scores, that includes grades 1 all the way up to grades 12. You just had to have a previous score. In all of the academic areas for the accountability index is for students who must have been enrolled with us on October 1st, and then who also took the assessment with us. So for students who arrived, their scores still matter to us, obviously, but they're just not included in the accountability index results. The next is chronic absenteeism. And so when we're looking at this, again, this is the percentage of points that we earned when it was related to the amount of points that they would assign on this part of the report card for chronic absenteeism. So when we look at this and we're talking about chronic absenteeism, as a reminder, it's anyone who is absent 10% or more of their enrolled days within the school year. So for the state, if we look at this, we've really done a tremendous job increasing this past year 7 percentage points and over for both all our students and our high needs students. And I just want to explain that's not our chronic absenteeism rate, and that's what these charts were to help illustrate. So essentially on the left side of each of the smaller graphs, you see the state level data. And so the blue lines are all students, okay? So obviously in 2018-19, that was pre-COVID. So they don't even have 1920 on there because of how schools shut down. They don't compare that data. That's always taken out of the data collection when we're looking at trend data over time. Since 21-22, personally, we have decreased our chronic absenteeism rate to 15.2, which is below the state average. Now, if we look at students with high needs, we're significantly below the state average at 24.8%. We're at 17.3. So again, that's taking kids out into all students and with high needs. Right now, as of when I pulled this original finalizing the slide deck, we were at 14.3% year to date for the 25-26 school year. With the work we are doing a lot around is at the high school level. We're working closely with Dan and Meg, and as well as the folks who are the academy directors in looking at where students are chronically absent and how we're addressing the needs of them as well as their families. I have to say some of our elementary schools are below 10% right now, which is phenomenal. And our middle schools have made great gains. You know, really, there have been very strategic action steps put into place of how to reduce this number. We know that nothing else will increase if we don't have students in school. So there's been a strong effort in those areas. The next piece of the accountability index is post-secondary preparation and readiness. So this is really about students of what kind of courses are they taking at the high school level and how are we preparing them for post-secondary experiences. So when we look at the taking courses, that's the percentage of students in grades 11 or 12 that participate in at least a couple of different things. You could have 2 courses throughout your high school experience. You could have had 2 courses in AP. You could have 2 CTE courses in one of 17, what they identify as career clusters, or 2 workplace experiences. So anytime through your high school, we get credit for it when they're 11th and 12th graders. So you can see that we earn 100% of that points. That's been huge around the CTE development that's been happening as a part of the academy work, as well as students taking the APs. The second part is the passing exams, where we do have a little bit of work to do. And although we are seeing gains in this area and we're continuing this improvement work that's happening there. So that's 11th or 12th graders who could have qualified for a couple different things. On the SAT, if they hit both math and reading at a certain benchmark or scaled score, you had to hit it in both. Same on the ACT, you had to hit a 3 or 4 on at least 3 out of the 4 exams on the ACT. And then if you scored a 3 or higher on your AP exam, and if you earned 3 or more college credits during your high school experience. So you can qualify through several different ways. You know, as we continue our dual credit programs and things like that, our classes, we're going to see this number go up. and we're already seeing that increase happening. So the next piece is graduation and post-secondary entrance. So this is whether or not you're on track to graduate, as well as what our graduation cohorts have looked like. So when we're talking about on track to graduation, what they do is they take our 9th graders and they say who earned enough credits to become a 10th grader. So when you're looking at what the graduation requirements are, you have to have at least 6 credits to be able to move into 10th grade. So this is how many students were able to do that. We have seen tremendous changes in this area. So we increased 11.1 percentage points. I know they're doing a tremendous job with the 9th grade academy of really looking at and supporting students of how they're passing courses and whether or not they're enrolled in the right courses and are they in school and all of that. So as we get students ready to think about their pathways, they're also highly engaged in what the work needs to be for their 9th grade experience. What really determines graduation rates is if they are on track for 9th grade. So when we look at that number in 4 years, if we're able to maintain that, you know, our graduation rates are going to continue to increase. So, but if we look at our 4-year graduation for all students, which would have been the 2024 cohort. So this is a little bit tricky because this is as a result of the 24-25 school year. They actually use the year before's graduation rates. So I did share later in the slides what our graduation rates are projected to be for the 24-25 school year, but they're kind of always a year behind with this because graduation rates don't get published for a while. So when we look at this, we earned 80.8%, a slight decrease at 2.1, and similar with our 6-year graduation rate. So that was actually a 2022 cohort. So you go back 6 years, right? And so how many students graduated there? And post-secondary entrance actually is how many students enrolled in a 2 or 4 degree program within 1 year of graduating high school. And that was according to the class of 2024. So we had a slight decrease in that. And this is always kind of one of those indicators that that folks are unsure if it's fair or not, because whether or not students actually attend a university or a program is somewhat outside some of our jurisdiction, but they still are attributing whether or not they attend to our district numbers. The final area around the accountability index is actually physical fitness and art access. So physical fitness is a part of a Connecticut physical fitness assessment. And on that, in order for students, for us to gain points in those areas, they have to score as kind of proficient or meeting standard in all 4 areas that they're assessed in. So when that happens, we have to have a participation rate of at least 90%. Ours was 94.6. We went up by 7.3 percentage points. I know there's been a lot of focus with our physical education teachers, as well as the department head, of the importance of developing these areas with our students. The second part is arts access. And so this is whether or not a student was enrolled in at least what considers part of fine arts in high school. So were they enrolled in at least one dance, theater, music, visual arts, or media arts in the year? So we were at 90, we earned 91.2 percentage points for that. The next slide takes a look at our overall accountability index. So this is the state overall average in the first part of the graph. The second piece is the district level for Danbury Public Schools, the district level for Norwalk, and the district level for Stamford. So it also takes into consideration, you'll see what that has looked like over time. You know, every district was higher as a part of the 2018-19 school year, and folks have been kind of recovering since then. We're in a similar trajectory as the other districts. But we vary greatly in our pure pupil expenditures. So according to the last 23-24, we were at 17,100, where Norwalk and Stanford were significantly above that with a total operating budget that was significantly more than what Danbury Public Schools is operating with. So just kind of side by side what that looks like. And just to give you some indication of where we're going as far as where we are right now and what is the most current data. These are our projections for where our students ended last year. It is not public data yet for the Connecticut Ed site. But what we project and what we've been working on state on is this is where we are. So again, previously I was showing you our accountability rate. That was like our report card grade almost. This is actual graduation rates. So if you look at our 24-25 school year compared to the 23-24 that was in the accountability index, we've increased overall graduation by 6.4 percentage points. Our high needs students went up by 7.1. Our multilingual learners did a tremendous change and an increase of 17.9. Our free and reduced lunch students went up, that qualify for free and reduced lunch went up by 2.5. And our students with disabilities went slightly down at 3.7. Another piece, I know some folks had some questions about where are we now with some proficiency level at this point of mid-year. And I just wanted to give you just kind of a quick snapshot on what that's looked like from the beginning of the year to the middle of the year. So our K-3 students are assessed on the DIBELS assessment. That is a state requirement. We have to assess students using an approved assessment for 3 times a year. And we report that data to the state by student. Since adopting the new ARC-Core program and the Hill for Literacy strategies that we've been doing a lot of professional learning about, we've been seeing some really significant gains, particularly in our lower grade levels. So I just wanted to highlight that a bit. This is what it currently looks like. BOY means beginning of the year. MOY is middle of the year. So overall, you'll see red are the students who are well below. And yellow is below, but progressing towards meeting grade level. And then at grade level is your green, and blue is your above grade level. So if you look at where we are with kindergarten from where they entered, it is a dramatic difference by mid-year. Last year, we increased kindergarten proficiency. If you look at the bullet points on the right, we increased proficiency from 26% to 63% by the time they left kindergarten. An amazing job by our kindergarten teachers. They also reduced students well below benchmark in that red area by 26%. So what's really hopeful about this year, and I wrote it down, is based on what we're seeing at mid-year right now, we've already decreased students well below benchmark in kindergarten by 25%. So that's a tremendous change. By the end of the year, that should be even more. So we assess again for those in the end of April, beginning of May. So our grade 1 students are showing a significant change as well. Typically by the end of the year, we went from 37% to 58% last year, reducing by 19. So we're seeing a good trend moving the proficiency level. Grade 2, decreasing their well below benchmark and increasing the amount of students above benchmark. Grade 3 is still an area with our DIBELS that we are looking at deeper into how students are performing on the subtest to identify areas where we need to provide additional support. And that's what's currently happening at the school level. Students are also assessed with iReady in grades 2 through 8 in reading. There are some things that we get out of iReady that we don't get on the DIBELS, particularly for our multilingual learners. With DIBELS, it is a timed assessment, and if you don't have the fluency, they kind of stop testing at certain places. Our iReady helps us gain more knowledge about students' needs in grades 2 and 3. So that is why they're assessed in both. to help meet their needs a little bit more specifically. So these were our results in grades 2 through 8 from the beginning of the year, which you'll see the lighter line at the bottom is the fall of 2025 and where we are in the winter. So we're seeing some really great improvement placements in those bands. Obviously, we want to reduce the red and the striped red areas, which is striped is 3 or more grade levels below. Again, this is everyone together in grades 2 through 8. What we do with the principals is really drill down by grade level and their classes and see where students are. The second is K-8 is assessed in iReady Math, and this is where we are across all those grade levels combined. So this is what we're looking at for those students being assessed and where they're falling. We're increasing the proficiency, as you'll see here. This is pretty old data for this. All tested grades received this assessment in December, right before break, so that we try to space out our testing, particularly with more heavily tested grades who get the science assessment, as well as the let's see what else, science, Naglieri we administer in 3rd grade. You know, there's just a lot of testing that happens in the spring. So we're really trying to be intentional to not have test fatigue for students and that they're not overwhelmed. So this most tested grades receive this in December and then will again in the spring. This is the 9-12 projected reading proficiency. This is where they were in the winter. So about 45% of students are considered, this is correlated to the SAT and PSAT. So those bands kind of are looking at where students with those benchmarks in mind. And so we're looking at about 45% of our students in grades 9 through 12 at being proficient in reading and ELA, and in math about 18.1% by the winter. So Kara, I don't know if you want me to answer any questions now or just kind of go into next steps with Allison and Christy.
Yeah, I would leave a moment for some questions. If I know that's a lot, it's, you know, we always try to present the data in person. That just didn't seem to work out in these last couple of times we've scheduled. So, you know, we know that it's a lot to digest, and you probably, especially for new board members, heard terms that might be unfamiliar or jargony. And so if there's anything that, you know, you might not even want to ask right now in the moment because you're still digesting it, certainly you can give me a call. Certainly we could talk offline. Certainly, you know, by the next time we have a meeting, you have some questions and you want to digest it, I'd be more than happy to explain or unpack some of the data for you. So we know it's a lot. So, you know, we just, we'll take it as it comes, but, and if there, you know, if there's any questions, we're happy to answer those now.
I just want to ask a question. Thank you, Kara, for all the information, and it's very encouraging. There seemed to be in the elementary schools a concern about the students as far as moving ahead with the reading, writing, and math. So I'm quite sure that all our schools are on the same level as far as teaching. So have you heard or are there any concern from the principals or staff or whatever concerning reading, writing, and math? And how do the team work together to improve that number?
Sure. That's a great question, Gladys. So we have a process where we intentionally support and select a couple of schools who seem to need a little more focus than others. And so we do things called instructional rounds. And instructional rounds start with a process of a data review. The data review looks at very explicit data by grade level, by teacher, by school. We look at how are the attendance rates going, what about chronic absenteeism, how are students doing on both, formative and summative
Mhm.
assessments across the year. And then we say, is this a school that, with some additional support, we should be able to move? And so the team makes some strategic decisions about where they're going to spend a majority of their time across maybe 4 or 5 schools, and then some schools who are maybe in better shape, if you will, statistically, will support them with more typical support. And so in that process, we go into every single classroom, we observe instruction. So we triangulate what we're seeing on paper and test data with what's happening in the classroom. And then we debrief with the principal and sometimes some other folks that are in the school to see what's going on. How do we increase the rigor of what's happening? And then how do we better support the school? We have a limited amount of support staff. So the folks that are on this screen are in schools at like almost like 3-4 times a week, and these processes are extraordinarily time consuming. So they take hours to do. There's prep that happens before that. There's hours in the school, and then there's debrief and action planning that takes place afterwards. And so again, we take our resources. There's not a lot. We have some of our supervisors and a couple of coaches, and we'll deploy them strategically to do coaching cycles with teachers, coaching cycles with principal. But we could stand to use some more of that staff for sure, Gladys. So it's a great question. There's not we have to choose because we don't have enough to do all to support as everybody in a deep way. So I would say that many of our schools can benefit by deeper levels of engagement with central office and instructional coaches to help support. And we know that where we've applied those strategic supports, we've helped schools improve. But really, at the end of the day, the courage and the will of the principal drives the outcomes in the schools. And our job in central office is to do everything we can to support them and to increase their level of understanding, but also help them increase the level of understanding with their teachers as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I did have a question, Kara. That was great data. It was great snapshot. Just to second Gladys' question was the accountability index values. I was wondering how was the category 3 schools supported when it comes to PD for staff, or even summer programs for students? How are those areas kind of, those supports being added?
For preschool, did you say?
No, for category 3.
Category
So-
3
Oh,
schools.
I'm sorry. I thought you said preschool. I'm sorry.
Sorry, category
So-
3 schools.
Yeah, so I would say like similar to what Kara said earlier, we do have a tiered system of support depending on typically the needs of the school. So we do look very deeply at the accountability index. At the beginning, as soon as it's released, Dr. Zalita and myself met with every single principal to review where they are in the accountability index, looked at what was identified as an area of maybe improvement or an area that they're doing quite well in, and how do we continue that work? I mean, there were places where we saw great gains, and we said to the principals, hey, like, how did you do that? Like, have you identified like what you think was the biggest indicator for that? And they were like, oh my gosh, this was one of my decisions. I got to make sure I keep doing that, right? So there's like both identification of like what's going well and what's a real challenge. So getting them first to understand the data so that they can make evidence-based decisions, because sometimes this is a lot and so many indicators go into it. So really supporting the principals, particularly in category 3, to understand the data and where they're situated in it. And then what is it that you have to monitor throughout the year to see, like, so say we come up with an action plan, like, really it was your 5th grade data that is showing places for that. And we have some tiered system of support, as we said with Kara, with instructional rounds, which we will talk about with our next steps. But then we say like, okay, here's ways that you can monitor it now to also see if it's making a difference. That's where the growth reports for like iReady come into place. as well as STAR and other things like that. So what's typically identified is like, where do leaders need support from central office, maybe from departments, from particular content areas? And then where do teachers specifically need instructional support from coaches? So that's what we'll identify. If there's a category 3 school where it was a particular grade level, we might go in and have a coach work specifically with those teachers to improve like some of their strategies in the classroom. Then also we're developing a plan with the principal around how to address the other components, and then getting departmental support. They're also getting coaching from Dr. Zelita as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions related to data or just anything that you've heard so far? Okay, I'm going to kick it all over to Allison and Christy to talk a little bit about some of the other components of the work that we're doing, particularly around PLCs and professional learning, and then some additional items that are, part of the work ahead.
I don't want to be too redundant. I think both Dr. Casimiro and Carawanza went into great depth around the instructional rounds process and how schools are selected for that process. Nonetheless, reiterating that all schools get some form of support through the data meetings. But schools who, based on their data, need a little bit more of a touch, engage in the instructional rounds process. And again, based on what comes out of those meetings and really looking at the data, really determines how we allocate our resources to be able to effectively support schools, but nonetheless, we ensure that every school receives some form of support, but the level of intensity of that support varies based on leadership. It could be a brand new leader who may need a little bit more support versus a leader who may be a bit more experienced, or based on the performance of the school. Christy, do you want to talk a little bit about the PLCs and professional learning?
Sure. So as our team, which is the teaching learning team that Kara mentioned, as well as our CDT or our CRC folks, this team is, our role really is to provide clear expectations for student learning to all stakeholders, and then support principals as the instructional leaders of the building to align their work with what they need for the teachers in their classroom. So with the alignment is, we're talking about professional learning. That's what, rather that's the after school time that they have, or the in school PLC times when we have our cadre subs now K5 to have a cycle in 6 through 12, they're built into their schedule. And so we want to align these professional learning experiences and PLCs to our district priorities so that we can support our teachers with their classroom practices, making sure that they have the highest leverage, most impactful strategies in place. The way that we've done this is to create these collaborative learning structures for principals. We've been holding principal PLCs, and in those sessions, most recently, we were talking about teacher PLCs. And in the sessions, we model for principals we did structured conversations. So we modeled for principals by using strategies that they could use with their teachers to help build this dialogue between teachers around student data as it relates to the data they're seeing right now, and the strategies they're going to use with their students. So these sessions align also to our professional standards for educational leaders. So at the same time that we're building their capacity, it's also building their capacity to support the capacity building they're doing for teachers. So it's kind of this snowball. So as we support principals in their learning, they're going to be able to support teachers better, which we're all here for, is to support the students in the classroom. So we also have some outside partners that come in. Hill for Literacy has been doing administrator training to support them. So when they're doing walkthroughs, whether it's by themselves or with one of our CRC folks or one of us, that they know how to give meaningful feedback in time to teachers Teachers are also getting coaching cycles through Hill. They have an online module that they're going through with Hill that's structured. We've had 2 different cohorts. Cohort 1 is in their 2nd year. Cohort 2 has started this year. And even with all that doggone snow, these modules are coming, and the modules are aligned. They go through a module. It's like a 3-hour. We've been doing them on the half days. And then the coaching cycles come in with the Hill for Literacy people. The strategies have been amazing support to our core implementation and have really helped teachers know when to use the strategies, which are all evidence-based. Really, our ultimate goal of the professional learning for principals is to strengthen that support, as I mentioned before, that they're giving to their teachers. We really look at it as a way to equip them in facilitating more meaningful PLC conversations, providing that targeted instructional feedback, supporting teachers in using data effectively. And I know Kara Wanzer mentioned it, that we support principals in learning more about the data, improving their data literacy so that they can bring it to their teachers, and also aligning the professional learning with the classroom needs. All of this really is intended to create a multiplier effect. If we're strengthening this instruction across classrooms, and we're going to see improvement in students as demonstrated by especially our early K-1-2. Does anyone have questions about any of that?
Lauren had to step off. So I am not sure if there's any other questions. Again, we know this is a lot, and this isn't the only time we talk about curriculum and programming. It's the heart of the work that we do. And I spent a lot of time with Gladys as chair talking about a lot of the improvement efforts. And I'm sure, for all of us, it's nice to see some of this come to fruition from a lot of the work from last year. But there's a lot of work to go, more to go on this. We're not satisfied. We love the bump up. We love seeing more green than any other color on that slide deck. If you take that away, but no one's resting on any laurels here. There's a tremendous amount of work to do. Over the course of this last year, our community has been a little bit traumatized, if you will, right? Most of our kids have been going through it and in class, and we're working through how, mitigating some of the effects of that in terms of their ability, to dig into the work. Our staff is working extremely hard. Our teachers are working very hard. There's always ways to get better at what we do. There's always ways to get more efficient, and there's always ways to bring more coherence and alignment to the work that we do. And so we're an organization that continually works on improving that. This team here is, there's no harder working group than some of the folks that you see on this call. And, hopefully this time next year, we continue to inch along with this. This is a marathon, right? Race. You got to pace yourself. It's not a sprint. Over multiple budget cycles, we hope to improve as we're able to bring in more resources to support the kids at scale. What I know about the team is that we have a lot of expertise to apply and to support. It's scaling that, having enough people to do the work over the course of the year is at the heart of kind of where we'd like to see this go. So again, not the first conversation we'll have on curriculum or programming or the work that we're doing, and certainly not the last this year. So you could certainly follow up with myself or anyone else, and more than happy to help unpack some of the data that you saw today. Okay, Al, since you opened, I might look to you to close us up if you're okay with that.
If no one has any questions, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
No, I would just like to say that the presentation.
Oh, you went on mute, Gladys.
Okay, that I said early, the presentation was great. It's a lot of information to absorb if you're a new board member, anything. And I will encourage our new board members to really read your material and not depend on the answer that someone else gives you. In your minutes, everything that you need to know, want to ask a question, and you can always call someone. And I know that they'll always take your telephone call and answer your question. Read your material. So with that,
You Gladys.
I
Oh, did
would like
someone
to be
take
quiet.
minutes? Someone take minutes? Anybody take minutes?
Oops.
Oopsie. All right, so we're gonna have to figure out, we're gonna need some minutes for this, I'm sure. I'm sure we can help with some of that. How about that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, I'm good if you're all good. And
Good.
if that's the case, then good night and thank you.
Thank
All right,
you.
have a good night.
Everyone.
Thank you.